Now let's see what we need. We definitely need 28 cores of that. Lots of memory. Can't go wrong with that. Oh yeah, 64 gigs of graphics RAM. Storage, yeah, I make a lot of videos. 8 terabytes. Afterburner, that one. Oh yeah, we definitely need a screen as well. Stand, adapter. Do you even need a Mac Pro? First of all, what is it? What is a Mac Pro? Well, a Mac Pro is pretty much the most powerful and expensive computer money can buy. It's designed for people who do things creatively. They make music, they make videos, they design games and apps. It's got pretty much unrivaled power and an almost unrivaled price tag. The Mac Pro is one of the most expensive computers in the world. It starts with the base level at £5,500 and goes all the way up to £60,000. But realistically, do you need that? Do you really need a computer that costs you £60,000? Or is there an alternative that can get you close? So let's start with a base model Mac Pro. What do you actually get with the Mac Pro, and does it warrant the £5,500 price tag? So looking at the components, inside there's an 8-core Intel Xeon processor up to 4 GHz turbo boost. Now that's a pretty beefy processor. However, the price that they put with this is insane. So to upgrade, you're looking at anything between £1,000 and £7,000 to add cores. Now I know a 28-core processor is powerful. However, there are some great alternatives such as the AMD Threadripper series, which goes up to 64 cores, and that will only cost half that at £3,500. For the RAM, the Mac Pro includes 4 lots of 8GB sticks at 32GB total, and adding another 16GB isn't too expensive at £300. However, once you start to go into the more extreme levels of RAM, such as 96 and 192, you're speaking well into 4 figures. Now, I know it would cost you 4 figures to get this from elsewhere. However, Apple does put quite a bit of markup on their RAM, and you could get it much cheaper if you looked elsewhere. For graphics, it's not too expensive. It does come with a Radeon Pro 580X, which is very similar to the one in the computer, which I'll be mentioning in a minute, with 8GB of graphics RAM. Now that should do you for pretty much any graphical task if you're editing videos or creating anything that's likely to go onto YouTube. If you're running something like Universal Studios, yes, you probably will need more graphics RAM. However, just for your average YouTube video, there's no way you're ever going to come anything close to needing 8GB. The next step up from the 8GB card is a 32GB card. Now this is total overkill for regular video editing. You're never going to need 32GB of graphics RAM. However, £2,400, not too bad, but still, we're talking adding another £2,500 onto a bill that started at £5,000. So even for just a couple of extra gigabytes of RAM that you don't need, it's a fortune. Now, the storage. This is where the other computer that I will be shortly mentioning comes into play, because Apple only offers you SSD upgrades on the Mac Pro. Do you really need SSDs for everything? Don't think so. So, is it worth it? It depends on your use, but I'd probably say no. So as you can see, the components inside the Mac Pro are insanely expensive. Can we build something that can match the power of that for less money? Well, time to find out. So the Mac Pro runs on Mac OS. Mac OS is Apple's own operating system for their computers, and it runs insanely smoothly. It's fast, it's incredibly stable, it will practically never crash, and the reason for that is because all Macs have the same components. Now, the components in the Mac you can only change when you're buying the Mac, and the reason for that is because the operating system is designed around those. However, there is an alternative: Windows. Windows is the most widely used operating system in the world, and we're currently on Windows 10. Mac is built specifically for creative people, but Windows is really catching up with this, and so many people are moving over to Windows for the reduced cost. You can get a Windows-built system that matches precisely what you need in terms of components and performance without the humongous price tag of a Mac Pro. The computer that we use here at Present Day Production to edit our videos is called the Beast. The reason for that is that it can handle whatever we throw at it. At the end of 2019, I was editing a video on our old Mac. Now, it's a powerful Mac, but it couldn't handle what I was trying to do on it. We had recorded a 8-camera setup for a live theatre show that was an hour and a half long, and it ended up being an insanely huge project. Now there's 450 gigabytes of video in this project, and our poor old Mac just could not handle it at all. Now I had two choices. Do I spend an absolute fortune on one of the brand new Mac Pros, or do I get a custom built Windows machine that can easily match the power of that base level Mac for virtually, well, a fraction of the price? So I got in contact with my professional PC builder friend, and he built me the Beast. Now it's powerful enough to edit 8K video. There's not really much point in that, but I like to future-proof things. So here are the specs of the Beast. The Beast features a 16-core AMD processor, 48 gigabytes of RAM, an 8GB graphics card, which can share the memory of the computer to take it up to 32 gigabytes of graphics RAM. And as you can see, that matches the second tier of the Mac Pro. But here is where the Beast comes into its own in terms of storage. Now, the Mac Pro only lets you put SSDs in. That's fine if you've got a ton of money. However, if you're trying to build a computer that can match that power for nowhere near that amount of money, you're going to need to do something inventive with your storage. So the Beast has 4 hard drives. It has an NVMe hard drive for Windows. This allows the operating system to run at lightning fast speeds, and it can turn on from a cold start in under 10 seconds. The storage is 2 standard hard drives in a RAID configuration, so it splits the data between the hard drives, allowing for double the speed of a standard hard drive. So you're getting almost the same performance as a standard SSD, but for nowhere near the amount of money. And finally, the cache SSD. And why is that important? Well, on this particular computer, it's powerful enough to edit video in real time without any caching. And that's great, but it's there just as a failsafe. But what is caching, and could we save even more money if we start using that? Well, yes. On our old Mac, caching was a feature that we used a lot, and it allowed us to work on projects that the computer normally wouldn't be able to run on. Yes, it was a bit of a pain, but it really saved us a lot of money until we could afford to buy the Beast. So again, what is caching? Well, when you're editing in any video editing software, every time you play back over a certain part of the film, the computer has to render what you're seeing in real time. So if you've done any color grading, any cuts, effects, transitions, titles, anything like that, any kind of manipulation to the video, the computer has to render that as you see it in real time. Now, luckily, our computer can handle that. However, most lower end computers wouldn't be able to handle that, our old Mac being one of those. So caching comes in helpful because it basically pre-renders a temporary version of the video for playback. This means that you only have to give it a couple of minutes to sort out the video, do what it needs to do, and then save a temporary copy to your hard drive so you can play back the video in real time without the constant reprocessing every time you view it. The downside to this is that it needs to recache and reprocess every time you make a change, so it can take a long time. However, this makes it much more accessible for video editing on low-end PCs. So theoretically, yes, you could do all of your editing on a £500 laptop, no problem. You would need to use the caching a lot and it would take a while. However, it's totally possible. But in the long run, you can't beat having powerful components for delivery. In a standard 4K render, the Beast can offer up to 180 frames a second of rendering speed. That means if you're editing 4K 25 frames a second video, it can render 9 seconds of video in 1 second. Now that is where the power of a high-spec computer really comes into its own. You don't have to spend all day waiting for a video to render. All you have to do is wait a couple of seconds and you've got your full film there. So in conclusion, do you really need a Mac Pro? Well, probably not. There are much cheaper alternatives that can do pretty much the same job for a fraction of the price. However, I must admit the Mac Pro does look cool. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you again soon.